You in partnership by HR leaders and Hacking HR and our friends at Jovio, the world's AI-powered recruitment marketing platform. Each week, we're joined by some of the world's top HR executives and experts to discuss the latest in HR, technology, and the future of work, and of course AI, because we can't go a week without talking about AI at this point. I'm Chris Rainey, co-founder of HR Leaders and Atlas Copilot, and host of the HR Leaders podcast. As always, I'm joined by my co-host Matt Burns, who's a former HR executive, global industry analyst, and co-founder at Atlas Copilot. We're going to be talking today about how AI is changing the hiring playbook and what talent leaders must do now. Our special guest is Netra Makon, who's a founder of Arton Consulting. Welcome, Netra. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you. I'm great. Happy Friday. And for those of you in the US, happy Valentine's Day. Such an appropriate topic as anyone who knows me. I generally speak with love and hearts in HR, so this is such an appropriate time. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Why was it only happen Valentine's Day for the US? What about you, the UK?
Oh, everyone. I just didn't know who celebrates Valentine's Day. There's some
I'm
people
only
are like,
joking. I'm only.
yeah.
Happy
Love
Valentine's
for
Day to
everybody.
everyone, wherever you are. Netra, before we jump in, tell everyone a bit about your background and the journey to where we are now, and this new venture of yours.
Sure. Thank you again. Thank you for having me. When people ask me about, what do I do? I always say, I don't just work in HR. I try to build, workplaces where people want to be, hence the hearts. People are my passion. I've spent 20 years leading HR strategy across industries such as higher education, healthcare, technology, and global organizations. The one thing I've learned, HR is so much more than policies and processes. So, when we think about people and culture and making sure people feel supported, that's what resonates to me as looking like success. Early in my career, I saw firsthand how frustrating it can be and how complex HR can be. So, for me, I wanted to get into HR to make a change. Um, there are too many outdated systems, hiring bottlenecks, and I know today we'll talk about AI and how we can help improve in some of those areas. But disengaged employees and things that should be simple just haven't been working. So when I start looking at HR differently, not just as a back office function, but as a strategic driver. So for me, that could actually help organizations retain and operate more efficiently. So when I'm focusing now is helping organizations within my business, art and consulting group, transforming HI from a cost center into a true business partner. And that's what I've done in my experience in other types of companies and organizations. And then again, how do we align HR with business goals and improve workforce planning and simplify the employee experience at the end of the day? Because when you can get HR right and people tend to stay longer, teams end up working better, and your business will grow. So that's the kind of impact that I love driving every day. And yes, you will hear me say the word love a lot. If anyone knows me, that's my language. So it's again so perfect that we're here on Valentine's Day.
No, it's your love language is love.
Love.
As well. Um,
Love of people, passionate about people.
let's jump straight in the deep end then. In your opinion, what's the biggest untapped potential of AI in hiring that most companies are really missing amongst all of this noise that's facing us right now?
Well, I think it's a changer in a sense that, it's a tool. It's how do you use the tool? It's similar to a computer, a pencil. Those are all tools that we use every day. It's about the output. AI is not going to change if you're not actually applying the application and using it. So I think for HR practitioners, it's the idea of actually applying it and how do you solve for something within your business. And again, it's not going to be the magic wand to answer those questions for you, but it will be a tool to help you become more efficient, to help you get there quickly, and to scale your business appropriately with your human capital in mind. So it's a game changer for sure. But the biggest output from all of this is how do businesses and HR practitioners utilize the tool? I can buy a MacBook Pro, I can buy a desktop, a gateway. I could buy all these computers, but it's not going to help me produce my thesis at the end. It's actually the person on the other side with the brain applying your knowledge and skills and experience, but AI is the tool to help you get there with efficiency.
Matt, did you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I totally agree. It's about use cases, Chris. We have this conversation at Atlas Copilot every single day. How do we connect artificial intelligence to
Yeah.
a use case that's meaningful to an organization? It's really important because there is so much that's possible with AI. You can focus on efficiencies. You can reduce the amount of resumes you're having to manually screen. You can be more thoughtful about candidate placement into the type of roles. And you can use AI to upskill and reskill. There's so many different applications. I think it's absolutely critical, as Netra mentioned, that tying it to a use case, tying it to application, that's the secret sauce with AI.
Yeah.
And I think to your point, it helps on both sides for the recruiter and candidates. If you could speed up the process, use it as a personalized outreach to ensure that, as people, we're spending on the things that matter, and that's connecting with your people. So AI, again, it's the tool that you use to help you for your process standpoint, but that connection piece doesn't ever go away. And I think that's where people get dismayed with, oh, it's going to take over my job. But I am advocate of it should be enhancing your job. And as HR practitioners, if we're not at the forefront leading this charge and being part of the conversation, we're going to get further behind in that and leading as executives and having our industry be a thought leader in the business and having a place at the table as everybody continues to talk about. But if we're not leading that charge, then we're going to get left behind very quickly. So it's a game changer for HR practitioners as a whole, because it allows us to be part of that conversation in a way, but not only be part of it, but to lead it, with our teams and with the human capital component from a business standpoint.
Yeah. There's a balance though, right? Because
Yes.
AI is great for efficiency and speed, but then how can companies ensure it strengthens, not weaknesses, the talent quality? It should filter candidates, which is great at doing, but it shouldn't dictate the final hiring decisions. So many companies haven't figured that process. So what it means to be a recruiter now is completely changed. You're not someone who's doing the administrative work. You're now an advisor, a partner to the business as well. So how do you see that playing out to ensure that the quality of a talent isn't affected and the end decision is still made by the human?
Well, I think what you're saying too, what we're doing is it's outdating, it's disrupting, I should say, outdated hiring processes and models. It's enabling us as talent professionals to be smarter and more strategic in hiring. So the true impact does come from AI itself, but also comes from how we apply it to build, better, more inclusive hiring experiences, taking data points and maybe skills assessments and mapping out talent appropriately and becoming more efficient versus taking 6 months to fill a role. Now you have an opportunity to fill a role, within 2 to 3 months. And again, there's some data to support it in a way that's not just anecdotal, but there's also some concrete information that you can help to inform better decisions and smarter hiring decisions.
Yeah, I think it's a really critical point. I get really excited about the opportunity to embed AI thoughtfully in the process. And I think that's kind of the key word I'm thinking about is where do you thoughtfully apply it? And there are certain interactions where you want to have, I would argue, a digital interface. It's more efficient. It might be more candidate centric. I think about things like time zones. I think about things like people's availability. The ability to interact with an organization asynchronously would, in a lot of cases, expedite the hiring process. But to Chris, to your point, there are certain inflection points where I want to have a human in the loop really meaningfully.
Right.
That might be the job offer stage, the first day you join the organization. Like those are interaction points where, at least today, I don't want someone to go to an AI boss on their first day and have a conversation with AI in that context. Maybe 5 years from now, but right now I still think we need to have that human in the loop.
Yeah. And also AI doesn't understand the nuance, right? It doesn't understand people's personal circumstances. It doesn't understand cultural nuance as well. There's a lot of things where you can't leave that up to chance, right? Someone may be going through that candidate process and having some personal challenges, right? It could be, and those things you just can't. AI should never be the decision maker, and that's why we need to have the human in the loop. I know you mentioned off camera that you're writing an ebook regarding AI and HR, right? If I remember that correctly,
Yes.
what's some of the common mistakes that you're seeing companies making when they integrate AI into talent acquisition?
That's a great question. Yeah, so the idea for the book really came from a simple reality that, as HR practitioners who want to be part of change and take it seriously as a strategic leader, we have to step up and lead that change, as I mentioned before. So AI is already reshaping how businesses operate, and if HR professionals don't take that time to understand it, experiment with it, and apply it in meaningful ways, we're just again going to get left behind. So for me, some of the surprises is, often people will say, oh yeah, I'm using it, but you're finding that people really aren't using it, and how are you using it? And it's more than just prompting, and we can't oversimplify it. So it's taking the opportunity to really dig deeper, to be a data scientist in some ways, or a data analyst. You don't have to be an expert, but it's really honing in on those skills. So in writing this book, I wanted to provide a resource for HR practitioners as a go-to guide, because there's a lot of information out there. So how do you make it a little bit more concise, but most importantly, just to get people to try it, and to actually apply it. I remember when AI first came out, in my family and so forth, and my spouse was asking me, well, have you actually used it yet? I was talking about it. This was a few years ago. And I was like, yeah, I haven't actually used it. And I find that even in our daily walks, as practitioners, that's happening quite often, more often than we think. People are a little embarrassed. It's something new, may not know what to do with it. But again, just helping people be comfortable with utilizing the tool and understanding that it's more than just prompting. And
Yeah.
so that was my reasoning for wanting to put together this really short, condensed ebook to help HR practitioners
Yeah.
just get started, just jump in, just
I
jump in.
think one of the things I'm seeing a lot of companies doing really well. I was interviewing Amazon's executive HR team this week, and they've created like a sandbox internally,
Yeah.
like an AI sandbox that they give everyone access to. It isn't within a specific tool, so there's less risk. So it's a sandbox. They can play around with it, and they actually allocate time, specific time, carve
Yes.
out time for people to do this, right? So people can't say, oh, I don't have any time to do it. No, we've like told you you have time to do that, and they're coming back with all different types of use cases and discoveries and ideas and innovations that end up being integrated. So rather than just wait until you embed a tool that has AI to then play around, where there are consequences at that point as well, and that could be unintentionally excluding underrepresented talent, right?
Right.
As a
Yes.
consequence of that. So I would, anyone listening who hasn't done it, find a way to create a sandbox. Some companies are buying Atlas Copilot, and they're using our platform actually as a way of doing that. Some are buying the enterprise version of OpenAI and creating some safe guardrails for people to play around in there. But you have to do that, and if you don't, people are going to do it anyway. So you're just
Right.
fooling yourself if you think that people aren't already doing it. So create that sandbox and extract those innovations and ideas. Matt, what are your thoughts? Because we,
Yeah.
we call Matt GPT sometimes internally, just for everyone to know. So if anyone didn't know that, now everyone's going to call that Matt. Everyone comment Matt GPT in the chat if you send this out as well. Matt, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Like ChatGPT, I work 24/7, 365 as well,
There
so it
you
works out
go.
well. But all that being said, jokes aside, I think it's really important, your point, Chris, around the necessity to create a safe space in an organization for experimentation, because if you don't, people will experiment themselves. And in some cases, they're going to find incredible innovations that would benefit the broader organization, their peers, their colleagues, but they won't have access to it because there's a lot of shame around bringing the AI knowledge to the workplace if it's not acceptable to be experimenting. So I think you really want to create the conditions for that, because there are so many use cases in organizations that the architects of digital transformations involving AI couldn't possibly have visibility into. I think
No.
about an accounts payable clerk or a marketing coordinator or a finance analyst or an HR specialist. All these different roles are going to have myriad use cases. So if we keep it in boxes, you're going to limit the amount of innovation. And the one thing about AI is you're democratizing knowledge. So I know it's a seed change. I know it's different than most digital transformations, which work in curated groups, very controlled studies. I've certainly done many of them myself. This is different. We have to give people the opportunity to experiment, because if we don't, we're going to miss out on some really, really great innovations internally.
That's a great point. You mentioned something about play before, and I was very fortunate at the organization I was at previously, WPP, where it was encouraged for us to play in the system. But one thing I was finding is that people just didn't know how to play. So in some ways, so that's another reason for creating the ebook. How do you play in the system? What does it mean? What does it do? How is it going to help me? And you won't know until you actually, to your point, create that sandbox for yourself or your organization to be able to actually apply and see the output and the outcome of it. But you have to learn how to play. You have to learn how to figure out how does this work. And again, it's a great opportunity if people haven't started, and if they are doing it. I think I would encourage, even if it's not part of your organization, if you're doing it on your own, I think that's phenomenal. Being able to have those honed in on those skill sets is going to be crucial, especially as a part of the ebook includes AI. It's empowering AI generalists and for HR practitioners. So becoming an AI generalist and understanding what that means.
Yeah, it's going to be a new evolving role that I never thought I'd see online. The AI HR generalist. It's going to
Yes.
be, and most HR teams, the world-class ones I'm speaking to, already have that talent in their team. They
Right.
have, and by the way, it's not a prompt engineer. Just to be clear, for everyone listening, it's way beyond that. Because now AI is advanced so fast that you don't need a prompt engineer. You know why? Because the AI can write the prompt for you. You just say,
That's
"Hey,
right.
write me a prompt for this," and it writes you the prompt. So it's more around a someone who has that capability but understands how to connect that almost through like a business partner lens to the goal and the challenges of what problem we're trying to solve, and working back, like Matt said at the beginning of this episode, of what's the use case. Because you can lost and get lost down the AI rabbit hole, and many people do. So start with that and work your way around. One of the things that we did early on, which was a request from the HR community in Atlas, was actually just create predefined prompts inside of Atlas. So the moment you enter, we've got some guidance. There's some toys in the playground. That's why it's a good
Look at
analogy.
that.
There's some toys in the playground, right? We don't just give you the playground. We're like, here's some toys. How do I create an onboarding plan? It's right there. How do I create an AI ethics council? It's all there, right? So you do have to give some guidance as well, but make it a safe space for people as well. Anything that we missed on that, Matt?
Well, I just think that AI also becomes a thinking companion. So to your point, Chris, we get from prompt engineering into how do we use AI in the flow of work beyond just answering the question in the moment. And what I'm using it a lot for these days is, as I mentioned, thinking companion. Because the reality is when I start either some research or I'm starting to do some due diligence, I have a bias that I'm bringing into that conversation. So I might miss certain aspects of the problem. I'll give you an example, Chris. The other day, I was working with an HR organization trying to develop a strategy around talent management in Europe. And my line of sight was very North American centric in that conversation. So as I was interacting with Atlas Copilot and trying to get it to build the prompt and have the answers, I realized that very early on that, okay, my bias here is towards North America. I need to introduce more of a global lens in this conversation. The AI is illuminating that for me. But rather than simply rewriting the prompt, I also got curious, started to pull on the thread and go back and forth with the AI, help me, educate me, fill in some of the gaps. And I came away with a better final product, but also smarter from the process. And I think that's a really key piece is we're going to start to think about AI more as a learning solution going forward, and that each of us are all starting in a different place, but we're all trying to head towards the same place, which is how do we use this technology to make workplaces more human-centric?
Yeah. One of the ideas that came up kind of recently during one of my conversations with a CHRO, I don't want to mention their names because I know they're working on this internally. They probably don't want me to mention it. Is there when you talk about that thinking companion or that AI agent that understands you, your profile, your experience, your skills, and your capabilities, is imagine the idea of being able to take that with you to your next role. Right. So imagine, does that make sense? So
Absolutely.
so
Yes.
you've gone on some learning pathways. He understands the
Yeah.
nuance to function, and now I'm going to a different company of a different industry, but I bring that agent with me, my thinking companion, my partner in crime, along, and that really changes the narrative as well, because then you can start to really look at this in a completely different way. And we haven't quite done that yet with Atlas, but it's an interesting thought process of how come people, because the more you use an agent, as people know listening, the more it understands that you. It understands the context, the nuance, who you are, the tone of how Chris talks. So the ability to take that with you through your career is a really interesting concept as we start to talk about hiring and and talent. I just thought I'd throw that out there. I'd love to hear your thoughts and anyone in the chat on that.
Yeah, I think it's the right time for these kind of conversations, Chris, because when we talk about growth, it's not necessarily linear. And as
Yeah,
you explore opportunities in organizations, you're going to have different roles, you're going to have different opportunities, different projects. Each of them are opportunities for experiential learning. But I love the idea of being able to bring that through your career in a more formalized way, because the reality is this is the future of work is today. We don't have those 20-year, 25-year career paths. You don't spend 10 to 15 years in a singular job to master. Like it's changing, and we need people to be more dynamic, need them to have more experiences. And AI does a great job synthesizing all those disparate experiences to provide a cohesive learning pathway. I mentioned before, we're not all starting from the same place. Netra has some great experiences across a number of industries, and that's going to inform her path going forward. But as she maybe decides that she wants to evolve that process, there may be gaps that show up along the way. AI can help her fill in those gaps very specifically. So she doesn't have to double click and do the work all over again, but she can focus on the areas that are of greatest leverage so that she can have the most effect in her opportunities.
yeah,
As you're talking, I'm thinking about, career development and talent mapping. And those are some areas that I was able to bring together with AI technologies to really bring it to fruition quicker. You'd be amazed at organizations, very large organizations have so many different systems in place currently. And then how do you get all of the organizations to talk to each other? And again, not that AI is the end all be all, but it can help you as the person on the other end and putting the data and understanding how do you make this all work together. And it can help you build that platform so that you can get to a place of feeling empowered and therefore being able to help organizations with a lot of data sets and how to and pulling that information together. So I think about, as we're talking about skills and talking about talent development, AI has been my assistant, my friend, my career coach. I won't say therapist, haven't dare gone there yet, but incorporating AI into your daily life, again, as you mentioned, does help us. You're teaching it to learn more about you and how you operate as a person. And so it gets easier with the output, the more you're prompting and looking and being curious. And also, I know there's some thoughts around critical skills thinking. I think it does help with that. We do have to be careful. I've known for myself, there's been some times I'm like, oh, okay, am I using AI so much that I'm forgetting my critical skills and
yeah,
that curiosity? So there's also that balance that you always want to. Sometimes I'll just sit down and write and brainstorm versus just saying, okay, chat, help me, or whatever platform I'm using at the time. But sometimes even for creative visual, it's sometimes better just to go back to pen and paper and or a whiteboard and just draw out what it is that you're trying to convey, and then you utilize AI to help you get there. So critical thinking, I think, is another component that's going to be something that we'll need to kind of look at a little bit more closely as you incorporate that AI tool and that human centric opportunity as well.
yeah. It's so important because that is activating completely different parts of your brain. By, like you said, starting from a blank piece of paper and a pen, you're having to engage different parts of your brain, and
Yes.
that critical thinking, that is one of my concerns. I'll be honest, moving forward now, it's coming so easy to use
Mhm.
it that it's going to be, the creativity is going to become even more, and critical thinking is going to become so important now. as well as the technology evolves. Someone in the chat asked, we're spoken about a lot, but if there's just sort of one AI-driven hiring strategy in 2025 to focus on, what would it be? I'll start by saying, from my perspective, given the conversation I'm having of last year, I would say if you haven't already looked at it, look at AI-powered internal talent mobility, talent marketplaces.
Yes.
It's an incredible tool to retain top talent, to help build a skills-based organization, to really empower your employees to take charge of their career. And especially as we move to becoming more gig work and kind of removing hierarchies in your organization, if you don't have that, there's so much untapped potential. And a lot of these skills that we were talking about right now already exist in all your organization. You just don't know, right? There's an opportunity within the marketplace to do mentoring as well. So that's an area where I'm seeing AI have significant impact to help companies move towards both having the agility, mobility, and the capability to become a skills-based organization, which is leading, as I said, to a lot of retention and saving a lot of costs in terms of hiring externally as well. So that's what I would say. How about you, Matt?
For me, I'm really passionate about the candidate experience from the time they first interact with an organization until the time they take that first role. And I think a lot of organizations I talk to still really haven't figured this out yet. It is limited interaction between yourself and the hiring manager or a recruitment member, but there's a lot of gaps in between, and we rely a lot upon the candidate to fill in those gaps through their own research. But imagine having a repository of information, company values, career opportunities, strategy, community activations, have that available to the candidate, and then they can interact with that information using artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence can keep them engaged during the candidate process. We've all
Yeah.
applied for jobs and been in that lonely space where you're sending out resumes and you're not hearing anything back from people, and it's super frustrating. But if you can interact with the organization asynchronously using artificial intelligence, you're going to be able to come to those first conversations, those interviews, those discussions more informed. And ultimately, you're going to build better cultural cohesion and make better decisions around people self-selecting in or self-selecting out, because you'll have been more transparent about what you're actually offering in terms of the opportunity. And that for me is almost like a pay me now, pay me later conversation. To me, it's not successful if a candidate comes into the organization and on 30 days later, they're like, this is not what I signed up for. That's a terrible experience for everybody involved. And I think artificial intelligence can intervene earlier, because the reality is our recruitment teams are stretched. They just don't have the time to work one-to-one with all of the candidates and all of the opportunities.
Yeah.
Artificial intelligence allows to create a little bit more of engagement through the process and start to treat people like people.
Yeah, I love that, by the way, because we've spoke about this a lot in the past around that showing up in the end-to-end candidate experience, and those moments that matter to sometimes are missed, right? Whether it's someone's anniversary, 10-year anniversary, or someone's birthday, or it's a critical moment in their career, using technology to map the entire employee life cycle and make sure that we recognize those moments that matter and use AI to create customized experiences for every employee that scales to them. And even the communication is communicated to them within their context. That was something that when I spoke to CHROs a few years ago, something they dreamed of. That
Yes.
now we have the capability to actually do that now. So I'm really excited about that. And there's some incredible companies already doing amazing work in that space as well. Nesha, what would you add? If there was sort of
I would just
if there was
add,
one thing to focus on, we've covered a lot. What would it be?
I would say operationalizing it so that I think summing up everything that you said from a talent development standpoint or the employee life cycle, if you can utilize AI to help operationalize your everyday activities and then customizing it, and you already said this before, customizing it to the employee experience individually, that is so crucial. My dream was always to have a book of reference of all your employees where you can know inside and out. I mean, there's some groundwork where some basics, but being able to have like a portfolio to say, this is my team, this is my organization, these are all the things that I need to know, this is where I need to, this is where they're going for their career path. AI can help you with that. And just again, customizing so that as you, as the practitioner or the leader of the organization, when you're meeting with someone individually, you can bring that human aspect to it from your point of view, but operationalizing AI to help you get there, I think is going to be a really big game changer for many organizations if they optimize it.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, that 30 minutes went fast.
It did.
Crazy.
It
Listen,
really
I
did.
appreciate you taking the time to come on. One thing I would add, because I just do think it's important for everyone, you got to start with the foundations first, right? So if you don't have an
Yes.
AI ethics council, if you haven't really got a team in the business that's aligned on that, make sure you do that. So you need the hygiene first, because otherwise, if you don't have a foundation, you can't build upon that. So if you start there, make sure you have the right policies, processes, and an AI ethics council in place, and stakeholders from different parts of the business engaged in that process. With that being said, we appreciate everyone joining in. Nesha, thank you for taking the time to come on the show.
Thank you for
Appreciate
having
you.
me.
And let us know when the ebook's available. We'll share it with everyone. Also, LinkedIn's the best place to connect with you. Is that what that would do?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Absolutely,
we'll
yes.
drop a link in the chat. So make sure you go and connect right now with Nesha on LinkedIn and follow. And are you going to announce that on LinkedIn when
I
the
will.
ebook's ready? Yeah. Well, now I put you
Yes.
on the spot. You have to.
No, I have to. I have no choice now.
So
The
I'm like,
pressure's on.
the pressure's on everyone to be able to do it. As always, thank you to my amazing co-host Matt, and to our friends at Jovio for helping us bring this panel together as always. Wherever you are, whether you're on LinkedIn in the chat right now or you're on Crowdcast, there's a link directly below. Make sure you download their top 10 best recruitment trends to attract, source, engage, and hire talent. Take a second to download that now, because the link is going to disappear after we stop going live. Apart from that, wherever you are in the world, enjoy the rest of your weekend. The weekend. Happy Valentine's Day again, and we'll see you all next week. See you later, everyone. Bye bye.